This video will cover following the customer's journey when they buy a fitness tracker. What are the 4 phases in the customer journey? As you can see, we have the initial consideration phase, the evaluation phase, the purchase phase, and the post-purchase phase. While this should not be confused with the sales funnel or decision-making process, these phases do overlap. But these are waves that a customer would go through, starting with the initial consideration phase. So this is when a customer considers a brand based on an exposure to a recent touch point and the perceptions of the brand. So during this stage, consumers develop opinions of various brands that kind of are competitors to the initial brand. They do this consciously or subconsciously through this ad or media exposure. Once they are exposed, they have an evaluation phase. So then they move through this wave. And here a customer would gather information on the brands, and this would depend on the product, and we will go through an example right now. The number of brands that a consumer is considering may increase, or brands may replace other choices that a consumer had initially thought of during step 1, especially when they hear positive word of mouth. So they might have an idea when they evaluate, and then someone comes along, swoops in with another word of mouth endorsement, and then that would be replaced. Then they would consider this new brand they might have never heard of. With the purchase phase, as it says, what is a bit different with the phases and not the decision-making process. During the purchase phase, a customer might first seek additional information before they make the purchase. So many brands would convince a consumer to buy their specific brand, and this is common when we enter a retail environment. If we look at a vacuum cleaner, a lot of competitors have their displays next to each other, and one brand would really try to sell their brand specifically. And a consumer might ask different questions here, but more or less ends with the same thing. They make the actual purchase. When they then move to the next wave or phase, which is then the post-purchase phase. And here the customer builds expectations based on this experience from the product that they have purchased, and they will use these expectations and the experience for future consideration. So again, this goes back to satisfaction equation. So if their performance is not up to their expectations, then of course they would switch to a different brand. But if their performance or the experience exceeds their expectations, of course they would be satisfied and endorse the specific brand or continue sticking and become a loyal consumer eventually. So then you can see if it was positive, they may enter the loyalty loop, and then they would go to the purchase phase or stage again. So they go back to the wave. But if they are not satisfied, of course, they would need to reconsider their alternatives. Now, let's have a look what happens when a customer is considering or what happens in the terms of a fitness tracker. So with the initial consideration phase, and you can use the images on screen. So I just use a different exposure point. So a touch point would be getting a newsletter from Healthline that Brenda subscribed to. So this female consumer specifically, because this ad is targeted, or this article is targeted towards women. And the article had tagline there, 9 best fitness trackers for women in 2022. So Brenda got the newsletter, clicked on the link, and ended up watching this video for the Whoop Strap 3. So Healthline, this would be the writer from Healthline reviewing the Whoop Strap specifically for this article, but they also discuss quite a few alternatives. But during the initial consideration phase, the female consumer, which then we would call Brenda, saw this Healthline review. So it's a video embedded in that article, starting with that. Then she was exposed to fitness trackers as a product category. And then after watching this video, she would form an opinion of this Whoop specifically. But then she would get an interest or develop an interest into, maybe it's a good idea to purchase this device or such a device. Let me read a bit further down. Moving into the evaluation phase. So then she reads the entire article. So upon scrolling down a bit, the article mentions a quick look at the best fitness trackers for women specifically, and you can see best overall, budget, for running, for swimming, for weightlifting, sleep tracking, stress management. So depends on what Brenda's needs are. She would click on a specific one that she might find valuable to her needs. So she reads the entire article from Healthline to gather information to the different brands, because you can see we have Polar, Mace, Fitbit, Garmin, the Whoop, the Aura, and so forth. So she would compare the specs and prices, value for money, and then she would evaluate basically all the alternatives available. But again, this is a short or narrow-minded view on one article. Typical consumers would find one product and read several articles during this evaluation phase, because they need to know if they're going to spend some hard-earned cash, they would search for several reviews of products. Then, after evaluating all of these, she thought, well, maybe let's just go for the best overall. It suits her budget. And then, according to Healthline, this was the Polar Vantage M. Now, again, this is a one-sided view from Healthline and based for women, or suggested for women. It might be different if you read the articles in the description from The Verge or any other tech site that basically evaluates these brands. But anyway, for the purchase phase, so based on so many online reviews that Brenda read, and since, well, Healthline deemed the Polar Vantage M as the best for the overall, she would be more inclined to then just make sure she wants this device and goes ahead and places the order. And she would not buy the Whoop Strap 3 that Healthline is promoting, of course, through this article. So she's going to go for the Vantage M. Now, during the post-purchase phase, this can be multiple avenues of looking at it. So while Brenda uses this Polar device, the Vantage M, two things can occur. A positive view would be it measured everything as hoped for, so a great balance between the heart rate, the calories, the steps, sleep and stress management, even some cycling or hiking in between, and she's very satisfied. Brenna's super satisfied with what it provided, so she will continue using Polar devices, even consider upgrading in the future. But it can also happen that she has a negative experience with this Polar Vantage M. Maybe it caused a rash on the skin, or it didn't measure her heart rate or sleep accurately, and then this is where it goes in waves. She would return the Polar Vantage M after a 2-week trial period, depends on where she bought it from, and then she would re-enter the purchase phase, and maybe now she would consider the Whoop Strap 3, or maybe this one was faulty, so she would just purchase a replacement Vantage M. Or maybe she was so negatively affected by these caveats or poor reflection or management in these specs, she would just go back to the drawing board and search for other articles and maybe go for a Garmin or Fitbit, or even venture into smartwatches. And that is more or less what would happen in the 4 phases of the customer journey when you consider purchasing a fitness device. So just think of your own cycle or whoops or flow or phases that you go through when you purchase, for example, a smartphone, a laptop, anything high involvement, and then you make notes of this as well. So hopefully you understand how the 4 phases of the customer journey work. Thanks for watching.